You live to catch Pokemon, but are 150 enough? Get ready for the next step. On October 15th, Pokemon Gold and Silver will arrive. You can reserve each copy for $5 and receive this CD-ROM filled with cool Pokemon stuff. You'll get trivia, music, and more. You can log on to Pokemon.com for details. Pokemon Gold and Silver, rated E for everyone. Gotta catch 'em all.
As a grown adult man who pays taxes, I can't help but feel that the all-time best-selling children's media franchise has somehow passed me by. My last foray into Pokemon was with Pokemon Moon back in 2016, and I realized pretty quickly with that game that they were no longer very much fun at all. It's been said before, but for the longest time it felt there were a lot of Pokemon games, but they're all essentially the same game with updated visuals, and sometimes the odd story flourish. With Legends Arceus last year, Pokemon finally decided to start playing with the formula a little. I didn't play Legends Arceus when it released last year, however I did watch my girlfriend play it, and that's the next best thing. I was very intrigued by it. Pokemon needed a formula change more than anything, and it finally got one with Legends Arceus. And now we have Scarlet and Violet, which is somewhat of a continuation of that formula change. I think the thing that fully sold me on getting a copy was the announcement of cooperative multiplayer. The idea of playing with my girlfriend in the same world was very enticing. Pokemon Scarlet is the most fun I've had with a Pokemon game since, I don't know, maybe playing Pokemon Gold before I was able to fully read or comprehend what was happening on the tiny Game Boy screen. So much so that I nicknamed my first Pokemon, a Totodile, my own first name because I misunderstood what the game was asking. That being said, I haven't really liked core Pokemon gameplay since I was that age either. Pokemon Scarlet sets itself apart from its predecessors with its open world setting, lack of random encounters, which is a thing every JRPG should at least consider doing from now until the end of video games, and its lack of boundaries. You'll notice that I didn't mention the combat or the graphical fidelity as a strong suit, and we'll get into that. Pokemon Scarlet could have been something really special if it didn't feel so rushed. The decision to do away with the zones of the map in Legends Arceus in favor of a larger map with one central hub was a very good decision. It makes the world feel more connected, although I do wonder how much these large areas affect performance. You're able to go almost anywhere on the map from the start with a focus around three main overarching missions. Overarching missions. You can help this guy Arvin with finding some herbs, fighting some big, large, huge Pokemon, and upgrading your Rhydon box legendary in the process. You can also clear gems, which gives you the badges that unlock the Elite Four, which is, the traditional Pokemon overarching goal. Or you can take down Team Star, which serves as the game's evil team, the Team Rocket, if you will. But they're basically just some delinquent schoolchildren. None of these on their own was particularly compelling, but the quest rewards work together well enough to make you want to complete each one. I prioritized the herb hunting so I could get more movement abilities from the box legendary, but you'll end up doing all of them by the end of the game. I did appreciate the mostly small scale of the story. The universe isn't in peril like so many stories end up being in long-running franchises like this one. It's mostly pretty contained until some pretty wooby-woo stuff at the end. With Pokemon, the most important thing is making the act of catching a Pokemon fun. Battling is fine, but at the end of the day, you're playing three-dimensional, extra complicated, spicy rock, paper, scissors. But unfortunately, the actual process of catching Pokemon is desperately missing the Pokeball throwing mechanic from Legends Arceus. The number one thing that hampers Pokemon games is that they are slow. If gameplay actions, animations, menus, what have you were snappier, then the experience would be so much nicer, but you end up wasting a lot of time trudging through battles for no reason. It also doesn't help that Pokemon animations are usually not the most visually pleasing, although they are at least somewhat better in this game. You're also very likely to stumble into at least a few places on the map where you're either way underleveled or way overleveled due to the map design. It never happened to me more than once or twice, and I'm not sure if the world's design subconsciously led me down a path of least resistance, or if I just happened to stumble into it, but I never really struggled with anything. Though once you're far enough into the game, hardly anything poses a legitimate threat anyway. Maybe this is something that can be solved with level scaling as you collect gym badges, but ultimately I don't think mainline Pokemon games are allowed enough development time to fully flesh out level balancing and what have you. Other JRPGs like Dragon Quest or, Zelda, I don't know if that counts as a JRPG, probably not. It takes years to come out because they're meticulously polished and refined. While I'm glad Game Freak was willing to implement some of the new ideas from Legends Arceus into the more mainline series, I wish they kept the Pokeball throwing mechanic specifically, and more importantly, I really wish they would have taken more time to optimize and think about game mechanics. Getting into battles and sitting through the slow animation start the fight just to chuck 20 great balls at a slow bro that you aren't going to use is deeply frustrating. There's 400 pokes in this game, so completing the Pokédex, while better than in classic Pokemon games, still feels more chore-like than it needs to. With more consideration to the player experience, completing the Pokédex can surely feel a little less like doing your taxes. To shift gears for a second, let's discuss these bugs. There are many. The game runs extremely bad for the flagship production of the richest media franchise ever. Frame lag is the primary issue that's the hardest to forgive for me. It's not just an issue with lag in visually busy areas, the game just sort of lags at all times. I've heard it may be due to some kind of memory leak of some kind, and maybe that'll get patched to some degree, but on release it was distractingly bad. Both NPCs and Pokemon sort of just clip around unless you're right up on them, and the battles are slow and far from being as snappy feeling as they should be, and the pop-in is insane. Pokemon have this thing where they just spawn right on top of you a lot of the time. I'm caught between this feeling like an interesting way to keep some form of random encounters around or just bad optimization. It's bad optimization. It's genuinely insane to me that this buggy mess is the most fun Pokemon game. This game's obviously full of glitches, but consider another game that released glitch aplenty, Cyberpunk 2077. Cyberpunk was and still is widely panned by critics and us normal people alike. While Scarlet and Violet are also somewhat frowned upon, the sentiment feels less, this game is a broken mess, to more of a, it's still fun despite the problems, which, that's exactly what I'm saying in this video. To be clear, I have not played any of Cyberpunk, though I'd like to. But part of the difference in perception may be due to gamer expectations. Everybody in the gaming multiverse was expecting Cyberpunk to be the second coming, but everyone and their great uncle had a pretty good idea of the caliber of product Pokemon would put out. At the same time, the first-person shooter gameplay of a Cyberpunk-type game is much more dependent on dudes not glitching around than a very easy turn-based game for children babies on account of, you gotta shoot those guys. Does that make sense? Anyway, honestly, the best thing about this game is this. You don't even have to play the game of Pokemon. It's perfect. There's a new mechanic where you just press a button and your Pokemon just kills other Pokemon without going into a battle. This is a super chill way to level your Pokemon, and it gives you something to idly do while exploring the map. It's obviously imperfect. I found my guy just wandering off into the distance instead of attacking the Pokemon I asked it to more often than not. But it adds a little more casual battling mechanics into the game that doesn't require the full, that thing. And the world itself is pretty chill. There's enough to explore and enough little things to find to keep you invested. Obviously, this is a game full of problems, but it's still somehow fun in spite of those glaring, blaring, ensnaring problems. Why did I do that? I rhyme. It's so obvious that they didn't allow themselves enough time to actually finish the game, which seems par for the course for Pokemon games nowadays, unfortunately. That said, this is the first Pokemon game I've ever really completed. I'm talking Pokédex diploma and everything. I've beaten the champion in plenty of games, but I never came close to slurping one down like an A&W root beer quite like I did this one. I even did a little shiny hunting with my girlfriend. Emphasis on a little, but still, that's a lot for me. Regardless, I really hope Game Freak recognizes the issues of this game and allows himself enough time to finish a mainline Pokemon game. And if the next game is a further improvement on this formula, I'll probably be in line to buy it.